The cost of living crisis in New Zealand has become very, very bad. New Zealand is facing a huge economic collapse, and here is why. If you are thinking of moving to New Zealand this year, I highly recommend that you start thinking twice before deciding to move here. The reason why I say that is because New Zealand is facing a huge economic collapse. What I mean by this is the country is in big danger and things aren't looking to get any better. The first major crisis that New Zealand is facing with this economic collapse is the cost of living. Now, in my previous video, I mentioned that New Zealand is an expensive place to live in. This was filmed back in 2022. Well, I hate to say this, but it's even worse now. Inflation has also gone up by 8%, with wages only increasing by 2%. Basically, living in New Zealand, the wages is here and the cost of living and expenses is up here. It's incredibly hard for people to live a good life in New Zealand unless you make a very good amount of income. Keep in mind that even making 100k plus a year in New Zealand is not enough to live a great life. So if you are looking to live a luxurious life without having to work too much, you might want to think twice before moving here. Because living a luxurious lifestyle in Auckland especially is very hard unless you come from a very wealthy family or you have a very good paying job. New Zealand is not a cheap country by any means. A lot of tourists come here thinking that New Zealand is a place that they can live in while working an average job, which isn't really the case. You won't really be living a great life if you're working an average job here unless you've got very low expenses, which is pretty uncommon because everything in New Zealand is expensive. The housing is expensive, the food is expensive. So don't think you will be able to save money and have a really good time while working an average job here, because it is not going to be that easy. Another reason why New Zealand is facing an economic collapse is because of the crime. The crime is getting ridiculously bad in New Zealand. It's getting so bad to the point where businesses are losing more money instead of making more money because of how much they are getting robbed. Now, this mainly affects small businesses such as dairy owners and some jewelry stores. These people are being hit the hardest because they get robbed a lot. New Zealand also has a justice system where youth do get away with crime most of the time, so if you do get robbed by a bunch of 16-year-olds, don't be surprised if you find out the police aren't going to do anything about it because they don't get punished for it. The only thing they get is a slap on the wrist, which is not enough for them to not do that crime again. Now, because a lot of businesses are losing a lot of money, this in return affects the economy. This in return affects a lot of New Zealanders and basically hurts the economy. New Zealand used to once be a very safe country and everyone in the world could travel here without having to worry about a single thing. Locals in New Zealand didn't have to worry about crime, and you could literally walk down the street at night time without having to worry about too much. Nowadays, if you walk in the streets of Auckland at night time, you are at a high risk of either being mugged, killed, or robbed. It's not a safe country that it used to be. So if you are thinking of moving to New Zealand because New Zealand is deemed to be a very safe country, just keep in mind that it's not as safe as people make it out to be. It used to be very safe at one point, however, it is not as safe as it once was. The reason why the crime rate is going so high is because of the recession. It's because of the recession and the cost of living. Now, we all know that the more expensive a place becomes, the higher the crime. We also know that once unemployment rises as well, crime also rises. Another reason why New Zealand is facing economic collapse is due to the mortgage rates. The mortgage rates and interest rates is very tough in New Zealand. A lot of banks have reclaimed houses due to people not being able to pay off their mortgages. This is due to the very high interest rates that the banks possess on individuals that do own homes. If you are thinking of moving to New Zealand to buy a house and to live a great life while working an average job, you are better off looking elsewhere, because believe me, this country is not good for that. If you want to live an average life and you want a decent house, go to Australia. It is a far better option because New Zealand will make it very tough for you to live a good life on an average income. As previously mentioned, if you do make a really good salary and you do have good income, you can live a very decent life in New Zealand or Auckland in general without having to worry about too much. But if you're like a middle class person who just doesn't earn as much, you might want to reinstate your decisions and you might want to think twice before moving here because it will be a risky move.